Yeah, so this is Catlateral Damage Remeowstered. It's Remeowstered because I released the original Catlateral Damage back in 2015. Um, and this is kind of a new and improved, kind of seeing it as like the definitive version of the original game. A lot of the same mechanics and content, but just kind of a lot of improvements and polish across the board. But um, so this game is a little bit different from the original in that the original was Steam and PS4. Well, and technically Ouya too, if anybody remembers that. um,
Yeah.
and coming, I think it was around 2018, trying to get a Switch dev kit and port the game over to there, and then realizing I did a lot of since I was kind of still learning how to use Unity and stuff back then. The game was not written very well or organized very well to make the port easy. So I kind of naively said, "Oh, I'll just rebuild the whole game in a newer version of Unity, um, and just that'll make it easy to port to Switch." And then 3 years later, we finally launched on Switch, but also
Nice.
Steam, and also PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series XS. Um,
Everywhere.
yeah, basically everywhere,
Wow.
which was uh, a challenge, but I think in the end it was worth it to kind of get to see the game on basically every console. But um, yeah, so that's kind of a background on the game. But I figured I'll run through the start and kind of talk through it and answer questions. So yeah, I thought that the joystick or the controller might be better for not making people motion sick, but we'll just do mouse and keyboard. Um,
I think it's fine.
yeah.
I mean, it's not too. Uh,
Yeah, I'll try not to go into like dev mode speed running because I feel like
yes,
that's
yes. Well,
usually
I was gonna say, right off the bat, what is the origins of cat lateral damage? Like the first one, what is like besides you, what you said before? But what are the origins of the idea behind the game?
so way back in I think end of 2013, I was working as a QA tester full time, um, actually with Graham who's here, way back when,
Oh, nice.
and I was doing a lot of game jams and stuff in my free time, just to kind of get better at programming and just game dev in general. And I took part in the 7 day FPS game jam, which I think it was like September 2013 or it was like fall 2013.
Is that like
Um,
was that Purple Monkey or something?
no, that one I think 7 day FPS I think was started by JW of Vlambeer,
Oh, okay.
if I remember correctly, and it really it's just a very straightforward like take 7 days, make an FPS game.
Yeah.
There's no really a theme, there's no prizes. It's just kind of a do whatever. And I wanted to take part of that, and having grown up with cats my whole life, I had never really seen a game where you played as a cat, and I was like, that seems like a fun week long project. So that's what I did, and it ended up taking off on Reddit. Um, Actually, like while I was at work,
Uh,
and a bunch of gaming sites like Polygon, Kotaku, whatever covered it. Like a couple months later, it was like early 2014. And then from there, I started working with Firehose Games to help, uh, ship it. We did a Kickstarter, went to PAX a bunch. Um, yeah, ported to PS4. Oh, I didn't mention it. We did a VR version too for the original game, um, which was really fun. Um, and yeah, I think that was that we launched in 20 May 2015. So um, yeah, a couple of years between the prototype and launch. But um, yeah, and oh, and the other thing too, just since I'm on this screen, the original game was all the levels were fully procedurally generated, as kind of an effort to
cool.
kind of increase replayability. This one opted for some kind of more handcrafted levels, but also with the procedural mode and kind of the litter box, that sandbox mode from the original game.
So is the goals one? Those are all like handmade levels that you go through.
Yeah, so these ones are so I start with generating a procedural level just because I had the system and it was a shortcut to making them. And then I kind of fine tune a bunch of things in it, and then set up specific goals and targets and stuff uh, for each level. And these ones also have there's these cat photos you can find similar to the original game, real life cat photos, and in the goals mode they're always the same. So these 3 photos are always the same place, same cats. But the procedural mode you can find, I think there's about 300 photos in the game now.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but yeah, and these yeah, these are all. I think there's one additional level I put in that wasn't in the original game, but by and large these are all the same kind of themes that were in the original game.
Time to make a mess.
Yeah, one of the other big changes with the original game too was that from the prototype and kind of into the full game, it was always like a more of a time attack type game where you had a time limit and just kind of a simple goal of knocking some number of things down. But this one of the bigger changes in this one was switching to more of a um, kind of an energy mechanic, so that your actions deplete the energy bar, but if you just sit still or you look around it, you can kind of take your time. And that was kind of a result of seeing it being more of a casual game and having more of a casual audience and not wanting, the
How do you get
stress
your
of a
energy
time
back?
lag. So there are a couple ways. There are actually this one up here. These kind of glowing purple spots. Oh my god. Okay. Um,
Oh, I see. Like little
and
cat nap
yeah,
areas.
yep.
Nice.
There's also a couple places where you can eat food that will uh, refill your energy a little bit too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, this is one of the. So yeah, this is my childhood cat, which he was kind
Oh,
of the main inspiration behind the game because he
oh
was
man.
an absolute demon. But and then I think this level also has my current cats.
Oh
So
my god, that looks like my cat
um,
Ryu.
the knife just reminded me that so we did a physical version on Switch and PS4 and PS5 for this game with limited run. And part of that we had to get like ESRB rated and all that stuff.
Yeah.
One of the bugs or not bugs, but one of the items they sent back was like they thought like when I forget what it was, if you knocked over the knife or like you can pick up the knife, they like the effect made it seem like the cat was getting hit by the knife or something, and they
Gee.
were like, "We're gonna have to like like increase the rating for violence," and I was like, "That's not what's happening. The cat never gets hurt. There's no violence. Like we do not need to give this a teen
They think
rating."
players were gonna do something like that to make it look
I
like
don't I don't know what they think. It's so some of
that's
their
that's crazy.
rules are kind of silly, but this is another new power up from that wasn't in the
Oh,
original
nice.
game. So yeah, I tried to have some fun with shaders and stuff in this game too.
Yeah.
Um, and then this kind
Are
of like,
you streaming your full screen or are you streaming just the game? Because I don't hear any audio from it. I
oh,
don't know if that's on purpose.
no, I'm streaming the game, so the audio should work, but I did turn it down a bunch just to,
Yeah, I mean it might be
I don't know
fine.
if you can, that better? Okay,
Okay, okay, yeah, yeah.
I'll just
That's
turn it
fine.
down for
I
myself.
was just curious if you were doing that on
Yeah,
purpose.
no, I just had it really low because it sounded really loud, but. Mhm. Yeah, so the original game was written like it was Unity, I think 5 or yeah, I think the last version of the original game was Unity 5, and the whole game or all the code that I wrote was in Unity script in JavaScript, which caused some problems, but it was just what I the closest to what I knew how to use back then. So upgrading to a newer version of Unity, I also wanted to just use C Sharp. And I feel like Unity script and C Sharp are like close enough that it's pretty straightforward, like syntactically to convert the code over. So there was, I think the bulk of the procedural generation code and the player movement code, I basically just translated the Unity script over to C Sharp. And that's what's being used here. But other than that, a lot of the like game architecture was like super poorly written and unorganized. So a lot of that stuff I just wrote from scratch, and a lot of the like UI menu transition stuff I just like the original game didn't have a lot of that, so ended up writing a lot of that. But yeah, some of the core functionality or like the procedural algorithms I used to like split up the rooms and stuff, that stuff was basically just translated over to C Sharp. Yeah, I feel like I think they dropped support for it a couple of years ago. But I started in college using ActionScript and doing some like Flash game dev with like Flixel. So moving over to Unity, I was like, oh, JavaScript looks like ActionScript. So that's what I just started using. And then I think towards the end of the original game's development, I was like, oh, I probably should have just started on C Sharp. But because a lot of like Unity assets and stuff just use C Sharp, and trying to get C Sharp to play nicely with Unity script was always a hassle. And I guess now no one has to worry about that anymore. So.
Anyone else have any questions? You can probably just chime right in.
What I got a quick question for you. It's like when you went ahead and you pitched the Remeowstered version, how many people came back and purchased the Remeowstered version as well as the original? Like, were there people that came back and said this was great, or did you offer it for free to existing customers? Like, how'd that work out with people who supported you with the first version?
It's hard to gauge a little bit. I think part of the reason was because I feel like I was kind of selfishly making the Remeowstered version just to make a better version of the original, because there were so many little things I was kind of unhappy with. But we didn't offer it. Well, so I don't want to say we didn't offer it for free, but we did do a kind of a closed beta before the game came out, which I posted to like our old Kickstarter backers, and like the small Discord server that I have. And then at the end of the beta, since it was only a handful of keys, I was thinking of revoking them, and then because the game is separate, like it's not like a free. There's not really a free upgrade path to it, just because it's such a different game.
Right.
But with the beta keys, I was just like, everybody can just have a copy of it, that participated in the beta. But yeah, I think there was definitely some friction with people like commenting on the Kickstarter and stuff, saying like, oh, this should be free, or like the usual kind of
Right, yeah.
angry gamer stuff, right? And trying to justify like it is a complete rewrite, and there's a bunch of new stuff, and all this stuff is kind of doesn't get isn't really worth it to some point. But no, I feel like there are actually, I think in terms of like sales numbers, there wasn't. I think the original game hit some amount of a zeitgeist back then, that like the Remeowstered version wasn't able to capitalize on. But I do feel like, based on like our Steam reviews and stuff, there were a lot of people that had played the original that got the new one and appreciated all the updates and stuff. I think on Steam we're closing in on 100 reviews, I think, last I checked.
Nice.
Compared to like the 900 reviews the original game had. But I mean, obviously the original game had been out for much longer too. But I think we only have like one negative review at this point, which I think is pretty good. But
Yep.
yeah, it's really hard to tell, you know, how, like, because I guess we have like sales numbers for data, but that also gets muddied because of it being on a bunch of consoles, like that
Right.
the original one wasn't on and stuff. But I think in general, I feel like the vibe I get is that people enjoyed it, and there was a vocal minority of people that were upset that they weren't getting something for free.
But it's so different. I mean, there's so much. How many people worked on it?
Mainly me. A lot of the assets were, at least the 3D assets were carried over from the original, where we worked with a contract artist
Oh, nice.
way back when. But I did some touch-ups on them. And all the new 2D assets are stuff that I made. And the music was remastered too, by the same guy, Brandon, who did the original game's music. And I also worked kind of towards the end, in the last couple months before launch, worked with somebody at Firehose on the marketing side, to help do, you know, social media posts, videos, that sort of thing. And then we also like had some other like things here and there for like the launch trailer. We hired somebody to work with that. But in terms of the core game stuff, it was mainly me. So doing all the game code and all the porting work and the QA and all that stuff.
Nice, because I see the developer listed on Steam. The developers also Firehose is in there.
Mhm.
So that's
I think this time around they did.
the
They
first
had a
one,
little.
anyway.
Yeah, they had a lot more involvement with the first game, compared to this one, but they still helped out a bunch. So
Okay.
I grab this key for the supermarket level.
Wait, would you just ate there? Did you get energy? I didn't say it.
Yeah.
Okay. It doesn't go into a sequence like napping. Okay, that makes sense.
This is one of those shader things I spent too much time on, where I was playing Half-Life Alyx in VR and looking at their, like, they got a bunch of things with like, oh, their liquid shader is really cool.
Right.
And I was like, I bet I could do that. So it's kind of wonky, but
That's cool.
yeah, it took probably a week or so of time that probably didn't need to be spent on that. But
I love how when you get up close to stuff, it looks really like comic booky almost, like, or like I don't know how to explain it, but it's very like satisfying.
Cell shaded almost.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. It's weird. When you get close to stuff, it looks really cool. Is there any kind of lens or like fisheye? Like, is it?
I did play around with a fisheye like post-processing effect, but I think I turned it off because it was too much.
Okay.
How'd the VR development go? Because I know when you released Catlateral Damage VR, it was pretty early on for VR, so 2017. How'd that work go?
It was honestly at that point like pretty quick and kind of fun to work on. So I think the way that kind of happened was we did the Kickstarter, and one of our Kickstarter backers was Chet Falasek, who was at Valve at the time. He worked on Portal and a bunch of stuff, but he was, I think, one of their main VR developers. And when the VR stuff, like the Vive, the first version of the Vive was coming out, like 2016 or a little bit earlier than that. I think I forget who we started talking to first, but I think we emailed him and was like, hey, we want to do this game in VR. Like how do we get a dev kit? And he ended up just sending 2 of them to us. And this was back in 2016, so I was still working out of the Firehose office. And we had a room in the office that I think Eitan, the studio head, was working out of. But for VR, like, we needed a space that was whatever it was, like 2 by 2 meters or 3 by 3 meters. So we ended up like stacking a bunch of desks in that room to set up all the VR stuff. For like about a month or 2, I basically just had this office to just do VR dev in. And I think at that point they still had some pretty easy to use like Unity plugins for VR. So I think just getting the like camera switched over and stuff to use the VR stuff was pretty straightforward. And then I think because the game's like pretty simple in terms of like the interaction with the world, like it was basically just hooking up colliders to the controllers and like modeling some big cat paws. And then the game was like, okay, let's basically like that's basically the game. And then obviously adding like a teleportation kind of locomotion function. But once those pieces were in, it was like it was fun pretty and playable pretty quickly. And I feel like a lot of the work ended up just being like optimization. And it ended up for like the VR version, we had to cut a couple of the levels, like the supermarket. Just like I could not get it performant in VR just because of the number of objects and the number of physics collisions and all that stuff. So it was a kind of a subset of the original game, but in terms of like playability, it ended up being pretty neat. I think my favorite part about it is we ended up just out of luck getting some booth space at PAX East. It was pretty soon after I started actually developing it, the VR version. And I think we were in like Corsar's booth or something. It was just like a small VR area in a bigger booth. But we had like a huge line like every day of PAX, which is pretty cool. I don't think it converted to sales or anything, but it was just cool to see a bunch of people play. And specifically a couple people that got so into it, they would like whack their friends. They were just like totally didn't know where they were and were flailing their arms around. But yeah, that was a fun time. Yeah.
We have one question. I don't know if you already answered this. Where did you get the cat pictures from on the character selection screen? Is that?
Yeah. So the first 3 playable cats are my cats, and the rest were from up until recently. The rest were from our Kickstarter backers. So we had a tier in the Kickstarter. I think it was like pretty expensive, where you could get your cat as a playable character. And so all those are from Kickstarter. I recently added 2 more, which were 2 of the cats that the marketing person I worked with at Firehose herd cats. One of them was in our launch trailer for Remeowstered. But yeah, most of them were from Kickstarter backers. I think one of them is I guess there's a couple like game cameos too, because one of them is Mitten from Gone Home, because they backed our Kickstarter. And then one was Fart Cat from Rich Gallup, who I think he's still local, or he was local to Boston. I know he's worked at a couple places here.
I didn't know Rich's Fart Cat made it into the game. I remember playing that game because you would bring it up in work all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so and that one we had fun with because so there's a dedicated meow button, which we did it before Stray, so I think I don't know, you can't patent that, but
Nice.
for Fart Cat specifically, we were like, well, Fart Cat can't meow. Fart Cat has fart in its name, so we ended up just getting a bunch of like fart sound. I think Rich sent us like 100 sound effects from his game to use, so we ended up just replacing the meows with farts. And I think that actually I think that's what got us the like comic mischief marker on our modifier, or whatever they call it, on the SRB, was specifically the flatulence noises,
Right.
which I think is really funny.
Hey guys, can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Hey, I was just watching the whole live. I got an idea. How about maybe implement like a time, like let's say for example have a time slot where the human comes back. The cat has to get the most amount of points, and maybe it creates a little bit of urgency. I know when I play like GTA or stuff like that, I love the missions that you have to do in a certain amount of time, or if not, you fail the mission. So maybe have like a little challenge that implements time.
Yeah, there was actually one of the I don't know what, it wasn't really a rule, but kind of a constraint that I worked with this game was trying not to put humans in, just because it being mostly a solo project, like having modeling and animating and programming the AI for a human seemed kind of a daunting task. But there was a mode that I wanted to do in the original game where it was kind of a like a stealth mode, where like basically there was a sleeping human, and every time you knock stuff over, excuse me, it would like make noise, and it was kind of like a don't wake the human mode. So you'd have to kind of play a little bit slower and try not to like doing something like this would be like way too noisy, and obviously that would wake the human up. But yeah, there were a couple ideas that involved like I know like one kind of joke idea we had for the original game was like if there was a kind of asymmetric multiplayer mode where one person plays this game and the other person has to like clean up after them like while they're doing it. But again, I think the development challenges of asymmetric multiplayer and having a humanoid rig and all that stuff, and the different viewpoints and all that stuff was just kind of out of scope for us, or I should say me.
You also had a time limit in the first one, right?
Yeah, there was a time limit in the first one. It was not a lot. Sorry, it didn't add too much urgency because the time limit tended to be high. Like it was like you'd have like 10 minutes in a level. But I think even still I think there was still a good number of players who felt that it was like too much. Like they didn't have enough time to, or at least like the goals were too high. So like kind of balancing that was a bit of a challenge too.
Nice. We have another question in the chat. You don't have to answer this if you don't want to. They were just wondering how many copies how well did your game sell on how well did it do on Switch, PS4, and PS5?
So I've actually we launched this game in September of last year. So the 1 year anniversary came up a couple weeks ago. So I actually went to go check to see if I could get like updated sales numbers to see like, oh, what were our 1 year sales, like numbers of copies sold and and revenue, which is a little bit trickier because with discounts and stuff, it's kind of hard to calculate that.
Right.
And I think if anyone's used any of the console backends in the past, or even the modern ones, it's like really hard to get that data easily. Like I when I was trying to compile the data, I was like trying to like there's some amount of like guesstimating to it. And every platform has, like, Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo all have like 3 separate interfaces for seeing sales data.
Right.
So like I couldn't even tell the total revenue that we've made on Switch because it's just not. It didn't look like it was something you could do on their website. Like I can see copies sold, but I can't see the actual revenue. So, anyways, it's
That's
kind of
strange.
tricky, and because the different platforms are, it's global. Well, sort of global. Like the Switch version isn't available in China because we didn't have like traditional Chinese localization or whatever. But and like I had the PlayStation versions only recently were available in Japan because of some reading thing too. There's like a bunch of different variables there, but at least in the data that I tracked, I guess the at a high level, the game sold okay, especially given the fact that I'm a solo developer. I think it's probably above average. Looking at the hundreds of games that come out on Steam and don't make back their
Right.
$100
Yep.
Steam direct deposit or whatever. So I think it's done all right. And actually, I think what's maybe more interesting to me is like the split of like where people have bought the game. And if I remember correctly, it's pretty evenly split among like PC, Xbox, PlayStation, and Switch. Like it's like pretty close to like 25% on every platform. I think Sony
That's interesting.
surprisingly has sold a little bit more. Because initially, like in the first month or so, it looked like Switch was selling way more than everything else. I think Switch was like 40% of the sales or whatever. But I think at this point, it seems like it's kind of evened out a little bit.
And is it Steam Deck ready or whatever?
Yeah. So I think
Certified?
Yeah, it was interesting. I got a random email one day from Valve that was just like, your game was verified. I was like, oh, cool. I guess you didn't like, they didn't like warn anybody, I guess, that they were testing it.
I thought the dev had to do that.
So there is in the back end like a way to look at your verified status and like resubmit it. I assume like if it wasn't verified and you fixed a bunch of issues, you could say, hey, I fixed a bunch of stuff, like, can you look at it again? But I don't really know. I assumed their methodology for verifying games was like based on sales or something. Oops. But so I have no idea why they verified this game. As because it was pretty early, I feel like. It was sometime it was like shortly after they started sending them out. Like in April or May. And like the original game, which has way more reviews and way more sales, like hasn't been verified yet. Although it does play well. I did test it. It does play well on Steam Deck. Yeah. But yeah, I don't. It is verified. I don't know why. I think it's just Valve works in mysterious ways sometimes. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I have to assume the like because it had recently come out or something that had something to do with it, but
Right.
or I don't know, some of their metrics saw that some noticeable number of people were trying to play it on Steam Deck or something, but
Right.
or maybe it was just an easy win because it was already like controller supported and all that stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, I could imagine that they want to be able to offer a certain number of titles, so it's in their interest to sell the deck to have more titles, you know. So I could probably see that. Would you ever have an option for ways for people to add their own cats or customize cats?
That's one of the features I wanted to add, but I think it got deprioritized with a bunch of other stuff that were kind of higher or more critical. But one of the things I wanted to do was like a basically like a character customization step where you could kind of save like presets of cats, because I feel like and I did find a bunch of references and stuff for it. Like there's only like so many colors that cats come in and so many patterns, right? And I feel like it would be pretty straightforward to make like a shader that's pretty customizable with, you know, pick your pattern, pick a primary and secondary color, you know, pick a body shape and pick a size, and like there you go, right? And that would cover like most people, like that most people could make their cat in the game.
Yeah.
But I think it's one of those features where I feel like it's pretty. I mean, I guess it's anything with game development, right? Like it would take like a couple days to get it in, but then it would take a couple of weeks to clean it up and make it ship ready.
Yep. Totally.
With like the UI screens and, you know, incorporating it into the data saving and just all the other stuff that comes along with it. So yeah, it just hadn't made it in, but yeah, it's definitely one of those things that I'd love to add.
Cool. Another question here. Tariq, you can ask it if you want, or if you want me to ask it.
I'll ask. Yeah, so I'm just curious, what were some of the challenges that you encountered while developing this game?
What's the biggest challenge or something?
Yeah, I feel like the general development was pretty straightforward, having it, you know, maintain a lot of the stuff from the original game, and the stuff that was added or improved like wasn't too challenging. I felt like the most challenging bits came with the console porting stuff, like making sure the supermarket was performant enough on Switch, and making sure it like ran at 30 FPS or whatever. I think maybe one of the biggest console challenges was user management on Xbox, which is surprisingly a pain. Mainly because Xbox is like, I feel like with most other consoles, like with Switch and PlayStation, they're like, when you boot the game, you have a user, right? Or you have a user that's associated with the controller that's playing the game. On Xbox, they're like, you can do whatever you want, and the developer has to manage that, or at least you had to in the past. And I feel like it shouldn't really be a challenge given that it's a single player game, but just because you can like log into any number of user accounts and have any number of controllers connected, and like all those permutations, like that ended up being like surprisingly challenging. Like the game itself worked, you know, it's performant on all the Xbox devices, but if you plug in a second controller, like everything just breaks. It was like really frustrating, and even more so because they were, you know, I wasn't the only developer running into this, and they with their plugin, they were planning on adding like a simplified user model support, so that, you know, if for single player games or smaller games, that you didn't need to switch around. Like it would basically handle it the way the other consoles did. But they didn't release that update until like a couple months after I launched. So I didn't get to take advantage of that. And retroactively adding it, I feel like would just cause more issues.
Cool. Have you ever seen anyone play this game, like not maybe like a speedrunner, but someone that see how you're running out of energy, like that does like perfect runs or something? Or is there a way to do a perfect run? Or
I don't know that I've seen it yet. I know there are a handful of people that were speedrunning the original game. The original game was actually at GDQ a couple years ago, which is kind of funny to me, especially since it's like fully procedural and there's not really much to speedrun. But it was a quick one. It was like 12 minutes. But
right.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen anybody
like this one seems
speedrun this one
primed
yet.
for it, right? Like where you have the energy bar and you have
Yeah,
to like
I
cut
was
corners. Like you have to really decide what you're gonna.
Yeah, I felt like
do,
with
right?
the static levels and the energy meter, it felt like it might have been more, I guess, speedrunner friendly.
I mean, this is definitely.
But I think there was some talk of speedrunning that I saw when the game first came out, but yeah, I don't think I've seen anything since then.
Now I have to check. Yeah, the first one I'm seeing. I'm not seeing any in the Remeowstered.
Chris, how many levels in total do you have?
I believe there are 10 total. There's like 5 kind of basic house-like levels, and then there's 5 bonus levels. And yeah, I think I mentioned that they're mostly from the original game. I wanted to add there were a couple more ideas I had for new levels, but just yeah, ran out of time, and realizing that making all the assets for them was going to take a long time. So
Yeah, that makes sense.
Have you added some DLC to your game yet?
Not yet. There have been a couple of small like free updates, but I think DLC. I feel like there's a couple, I guess, constraints with adding content that I have now, and one of them is localization. So the game is localized into 10 languages, and every time I want to add something else, there's bound to be more text that needs to be localized, which is just an additional cost on top of things. So it's trying to kind of a balance of, is it worth hiring the localization company to localize for an update or for DLC or whatnot, and then there's just like how additional content is handled on consoles, because I feel like with Steam DLC, it's pretty straightforward. You just like say I want to add DLC, and then you put the files in the bucket, and then like you set up the pricing, and then it's done. But I feel like all the consoles have their own different ways to do DLC, and I feel like trying to figure out how to get the update to fit all their different like technical logistics, and then setting up the pricing on all of them. It basically comes down to like, is it worth it? Like, is all the dev time and the costs worth any updates that come out? Like, is anyone gonna buy it? And frequently it seems like it'll take a lot of time and effort for not a lot of return. especially since this has been kind of like a side project since I've been working full time with Firehose. So any work I do on this is basically nights and weekends. So that definitely factors into like decisions of like should I add a
Right.
big bunch of content? It's like, well, I could, but I already worked 40 hours this week. Like, it was definitely a challenge, but I think I feel like I'm one of the rare people that feel like the pandemic kind of helped, in that I think like my commute to and from Cambridge was I'm living up in Wilmington, so I'd have to take the commuter rail to the Green Line and then walk a mile. So my commute ended up I ended up spending like 2.5 hours a day commuting. So like once the pandemics happened, um, I feel like I got a bunch of free time, and was able to put more time to working on the game, which ended up not being the greatest because I ended up kind of it's weird because it felt like I think I was technically crunching on the game because I was working, a couple hours every day after the full-time job and then working weekends on it. But I think I was enjoying myself while I was working on it. So it was like this weird kind of like it was work, but it was also a hobby. So I was enjoying it. So I ended up putting a bunch of dev time on it outside of the full-time job. But it didn't ever really feel like crunch. But I think now it's because the game's kind of out there. It's harder to kind of see like try to plan out. Should there be an update I do, or should there like what new feature could I work on? And again balance that with the time, because I feel like because of the pandemic, my routine has kind of solidified a different way, and I'm not really, not really looking forward to working on the game.
Yeah, there's
Now that it's
definitely
out, but
there's definitely some startup costs, like getting back into the once you're in a mode, like you're just going right when you
Yeah.
like during the pandemic, you were probably just going like working and then like right after work going to that, and then now that it's out, now you have to there's this whole like startup cost of getting back into it, and
yeah, there's definitely I guess there's like a motivational startup cost, but then there's also like the technical startup cost too, where like I did an update for the 1 year anniversary where we added like Steam trading cards and stuff, which is outside the game, so that was pretty straightforward. But there were a couple like bug fixes and minor things that I wanted to add to all versions of the game. But just like downloading the required updates for like the dev environment for Sony and Microsoft, and checking that the game files were going to work and stuff on everything, and then pushing a console, like updating the dev kit, activating the dev kit, like just all that stuff that when you're mid development, you don't really have to worry about that too much, or you just check on consoles once in a while. But when you want to do an update, you have to make sure everything's up to date again, push builds, test them on the dev kits and all that stuff, and just that ended up taking like way more time than I thought, because you'd think like, oh, I'll just boot it up and put the game on and see how it works, but the platform holders say no. You have to do things a very specific way, and that ends up eating a bunch of time and kind of being a pain. Whereas mid development, like at the start of the pandemic, it was just like you get into a groove of you're basically only targeting. Actually, I'm trying to think. At the start of the pandemic, I think I hadn't even started targeting PlayStation or Xbox yet. So it was really just like PC and Switch. So yeah, now that I've decided to do everything, it's kind of multiplied the amount of work I have to do every time I want to do enough.
right. Yeah, that seems daunting. By the way, Swanky Koala has the world record in Remeowstered version
Okay.
at 25 minutes. In-game time is 14 minutes 39 seconds, but the any percentage is 25 minutes 7 seconds. I don't know. Is that good, or is that what's the length of the game normally?
I think it's variable, mainly because there's no real like ending, I guess. There is like when you beat, I think it's when you beat the last level, or if you beat all the goals, it shows you the credits, which you can just see on the main menu whenever. So yeah, it's really just like beating all the, or completing all the goals is really the kind of how you beat the game. And I think that depends on, yeah, I feel like if you know where everything is, yeah, I feel like a half an hour is probably about as long as it would take.
I posted it in general. The any percentage world record. So if anyone here wants to beat that world record, can do it.
Yeah, I'm on.
What about well, that leads into like game testers. Like how did you have a lot of testing done?
Not as much as I would have liked. Coming from like a QA background. But I do think I've kind of gotten into this development cycle or style where when I make changes, I try to do some thorough testing like after it goes in. As opposed to like throwing a bunch of stuff in and then testing it all at the end. I try to like test more like piecemeal, I guess.
Yep.
And try to anticipate the different areas of the game that I'm touching when I'm adding new stuff or changing stuff. And that generally seems to work. But there were definitely a handful of bugs that were caught from the like closed beta tests that I did. And with people on Discord and stuff to get feedback. So yeah, I think the game's simple enough that it managed to be pretty stable without too much testing. But yeah, I mean there's I feel like there's still there's like one really annoying bug that I still never managed to figure out why it's happening, where
you do it right
like on
now?
these, I don't know how to repro it. It just
Okay.
happens every now and then when I'm testing
Okay.
and just annoys me every time. But it's one of these things where when you like, I'll unlock like this charge thing, right? It plays a little sound effect saying like, "Oh, you unlocked the thing." And every now and then, yeah, it didn't happen there. Every now and then it'll just loop that sound effect.
Oh,
And
Oh,
like
no.
it won't revert to the background music that was playing. And I don't know if it's just some weird like menu transition thing or scene transition thing or whatever it is, but I don't think anyone's noticed it. But every time I test the game, it like on consoles or whatever, it like pops up, and I get frustrated. That I'm like, I don't.
do you have to
It's
close do you have to close the game for it to stop looping, or do you just exit the section?
Usually when you exit the section, it fixes. So like if
Okay.
it did happen, like it'd be looping right now, and then if I quit to the main menu, it would stop and play
Okay,
the menu
right,
music, or vice versa. Like sometimes it'll happen on here too, but it's like such a minor bug, and nobody has noticed it so far that
That's so
it's
funny.
like whatever. It'll just live on in the game.
It's a feature. Can you get it to do that?
Yeah.
It's a glitch. We have another question. I think you already answered this. How is Remeowstered version different from the original? And what changes did you make?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so the main thing is like I mentioned, the gameplay structure with the replacing the time limit with the energy meter, and having these goals rather than before it was just like knock 150 items on the ground. And there's still some of those, but giving more varied objectives was the big thing. The game structure this is being really weird. The overall kind of game progression got an overhaul. So before it was every level was procedurally generated and you just played them in order, and it was very much like a high score game. Like how high can you get your score by playing through these levels in order. And here there's more of a level select screen where you can kind of hop around and play, whichever levels you want. And then besides that, there's just a lot of kind of minor. I don't know if I would call them minor, but there's a lot of just small improvements everywhere. Where the general visuals got, or the visuals in general got updated and improved a bit. There's a couple new features, like the catnip power up is new. The killing these moths is new. There's some new content. Like I think the original game had, I think 200 or 250 cat photos. And this one added a bunch more to find. What else? I feel like there's just like a bunch of small, like there's like for every element of the game, I thought, how can I make this a little bit better than it was? So stuff like the toilet paper unrolling. I think it looked absolutely awful in the original game. So I ended up redoing that with a kind of a shader trick.
I thought that was on the ceiling. That's crazy.
And then the other one of the other big things was you may have noticed there's some, I don't know what the quickest way to get one is. There's these little star-shaped cat treats that you can collect, and those are kind of a currency for unlocking like stat boosts and special abilities, which were completely randomized in the original game. And so those are persistent. So you can unlock them, and they unlock them for all the cats, and they're persistent throughout the different levels. So, yeah, I feel like it's
Nice.
a lot of just like a handful of things, just kind of everywhere.
What was your development time difference between the first and the remaster?
You mean the time between them, or like the dev cycle?
The dev cycle.
So the original game, I think, from kind of the prototype to our like 1.0 launch, I think was about a year and a half. And then I worked on it for maybe another year after that to add a couple content updates and like the VR update. So I think in total it was about 2.5 years, but that was mostly full time on that. Whereas this game, from kind of the start, was like end of 2018, and then we launched September of last year. So it was about 3 years, but most of that was part time.
Gotcha.
So I think it probably evened out.
Okay.
But I mean, also there was I think this dev cycle went a little bit faster because it was remaking a game that already existed. But then also there was, way more platforms to port to, which added. I think I think honestly when I decided to do the Xbox and the PlayStation versions, I feel like that probably only added like a month or two onto the dev cycle. Just given that I was already supporting controllers, and like I was already targeting Switch as kind of a min-spec device, so it obviously was going to run on Xbox and PlayStation. So I think that definitely helped. So the extra time was really just getting through all their specific logistics, and they're jumping through their hoops and stuff to get it to actually build for their consoles.
Nice. I like your pounce mechanic. I was wondering, like, how long did it take to get that to feel right? It seems like it feels good.
A lot of that was like I was saying before, like a lot of the movement code carried over from the original game. But in the original development, I know we did a lot of playtesting to get it right, because I think there was, I think one of the core, I don't know if I would say issues, but one of the core challenges with this is that it presents itself as a very like casual game, but then it has like standard FPS controls, which don't really play too well a lot of the times with more casual players. So there was definitely a lot of iteration on trying to get the controls so that they were like feeling good for people that were used to them, with used of standard FPS controls, but then also make it so that there were a couple little things to make it a little bit easier for casual players. So like we have a kind of coyote time thing, when you fall off surfaces, to make that a little more forgiving. There is I don't know if I would call it a mechanic, but the higher you're looking with the camera, the higher you jump, which is kind of it feels like a cat-like behavior, but also it kind of helps, when players want to go to a high place, the jump will kind of match where they're looking a little bit
Oh,
better.
that's cool.
So yeah, I
I
feel like there's just some small stuff like that to try to get it
Yeah.
a little more polished.
I noticed when at one point you jumped to a shelf almost straight up, and I remember thinking you're not going to make that, and you totally did, and I was like, oh, okay. I guess I'm just off.
Yeah, there's also another small adjustment. I think I carried it over in this game, where if you're, actually, I'll see if let me do a new level. If you're moving forward and you jump, you actually get a little bit of a forward boost, as opposed to if you're standing still and you jump, to try to help you clear horizontal gaps better. So yeah, so I think it's kind of hard to tell, but it does kind of account for your forward movement speed when you're jumping. So you kind of go, I forget the exact math, and the math is probably super hacky, but yeah, you do get a slight boost moving forward, specifically for the instances where, like, if you're on this table and you want to get to that shelf, like, it'll give you a little bit of a boost so that you'll make it.
Yeah.
Did you ever entertain doing third person?
Yeah, that is one of the most requested features. I think specifically
People want to
because
see the cat. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think it's a couple things. One, it allows you to see the cat more, which is always good. And then another one is I think because it presents itself as more of a casual game, I feel like more casual players are just more familiar with third-person controls, or it's easier to play a third-person game than a first-person game. So I think that is definitely something that I'm still, like, when I have a chunk of time, I want to look into it, because that was something that people requested in the original game, but it was like so late in development that it just wasn't feasible to hook it up. But in developing this one, it was definitely something that I had kind of on my radar, and tried to, like, didn't want to fully do it, didn't want to fully build two separate control schemes or camera schemes or whatever, but definitely trying to build it in a way that it could be added later.
Was it something you explored early on, or no? Were you always thinking this was first person?
Yeah, it was always a first person game, having come out of the game jam, the first person game jam. So yeah, it was honestly not something that I had thought of until people started asking for it.
Oh, interesting.
But yeah, it's definitely something, like, I spent a little bit of time, I think earlier this year, looking into it, like and basically just trying to keep the same character controller, but adding support for the third person model and the camera. And I think one of the limitations we had with the original game was that the cat model we had was it was made by an artist at Firehose, and he only made I think he joined the project late, so that he was only able to make like an idle animation and like a bathing animation. So we honestly just didn't have the assets to make the third person mode. But this time around, I opted for finding just a pre-made asset and customizing it for what I needed. And that asset had a bunch of animations and stuff included.
Right.
So I believe I have everything on the asset side for building the third person the third person cat. But I think it's the kind of the mapping the swatting animation to the actual swatting controls, because it's all physics driven, like making sure those line up was I think probably one of the bigger challenges with getting the third person mode in. Whereas this one, like the paws are just like two floating box collabs,
Right.
that just aren't attached to anything. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
definitely
it
something
seems like that would be a huge update.
Yeah, I think if I would definitely make a lot of noise about it if I can find the time to get it in. But yeah, that is on my list of things that
and then that's where you want to be able to customize your cat, because then you're looking at it.
Yeah.
Right. That's interesting. So is that the? Do you think like 5 years from now? What's the 5-year plan? Is that, do you want to keep going with this and keep updating it, or do you have Catlateral Damage Part 2, or?
I mean, I feel like this. I'm pretty happy with how this ended up. And like I feel like I did kind of hit my goal of building a I guess like a definitive version of the original game.
Yep.
I think there's obviously a lot of stuff that I'd love to have, given like infinite time and money. But I think I think it's one of the goals that I had with this one that wasn't really possible with the original game was making it so that it was more I don't want to say portable, but easier to modify, because the original game, it was basically impossible to add new content or anything. Just how it was built and how many things were like hard coded or written poorly. And with this one, a lot of it's much easier to change things and add stuff. So I feel like it could definitely become one of those more of like a slow burn project where I just every now and then come back to it and make some updates or make some additions or whatever. But yeah, right now I think having like I guess crunched through the pandemic on it to get it out. Basically this past year has just been kind of taking it easy. It's just like letting it ride. And it wasn't until like recently doing the like Steam trading card and point shop stuff that I was like I could probably get back into it soon.
Oh, nice.
Like take some more. I just need time really to focus on it.
Yeah.
But I have trouble focusing on more than one thing at a time. So.
Oh, I hear that. Did you just get extra points for putting those the balls in the pockets?
I don't think it's extra points. It simulates it hitting the floor. It's like an alternate way to get points. Yeah. Actually, I can unlock the Halloween level since it's seasonally appropriate.
So if anyone has any last minute questions. We've got about a little less than 15 minutes. If you want to type it out or speak it, feel free. If anyone has any kind of stuff, just jump right in.
Not a question, but I actually do have to go. But before I go, I wanted to say that no, this is really amazing.
Thanks.
Kind of inspires me to pick just like do like solo games again.
Yeah, and it came from a jam, right? I mean,
Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, something about just seeing a project from like conception to shipping is I feel like it's invaluable. Like no matter how big the game is, like I feel like this game is pretty big given that it's 3D and it was only me working on it, but I feel like it's also like a small game. It's a pretty self-contained game, so
Mhm.
like I feel like being able to just say I want to make this this game and ship it, and on whatever platform, Steam, Itch, whatever. I feel like it's always nice to say, I finished a thing and
Yeah.
I put it out.
How long between the game jam and when you started working on it?
So for the original game, after the game jam, I spent a couple weeks, I think, just kind of fixing bugs and polishing stuff up. And then it wasn't until I think it was like 4 or 5 months before I actually started like full-time development on it. Because I was doing like nights and weekends work on it, and posting it every now and then to like Reddit or whatever for feedback.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, it wasn't until the game got a bunch of press and stuff that I was like, well, I could just do this full time if people are gonna buy it. And then
Nice.
obviously getting connected with Firehose and working with them is kind of the push into the full-time development.
So was this game part of your interview or like part of your portfolio? Like because you made this first before Firehose or no? The first one.
Kind of. It's a unique situation, I think, in that like Firehose was trying out an indie game incubator back then. And I was the first game to work with them on that.
Oh, cool.
And I think since we had worked together, like I was working out of their office for about a year before we launched the original game.
And you weren't an employee?
No, I was. They were paying a stipend and offering like dev support and stuff, but was not an employee at that point. And then
Interesting.
and then we did a small VR game together in like 2016, end of 2016, early 2017. Still not an employee, and then they got a pretty sizable contract project. And they needed more people on the team. And they were like, well, we've been working with you for a couple of years and we need a project manager, and you seem good at managing projects since you shipped the game.
Wow.
So like, do you want to just work full time? And it was just like, okay, like no interview or anything.
Oh, wow.
I think it was like basically working with them for a year and a half was my interview.
Yeah.
I guess.
Right.
So I guess it was a longer interview process, but
they knew what they were getting into.
yeah.
So that's cool.
I know, it's really cool. Okay, I actually have to go now. Take care, guys. Bye.
All right.
IRM. Thanks
Bye.
for coming.
Yeah, no problem.
Chris, how is that what you do as your main role? Production, would you say, right?
PM.
Yeah, not anymore. My role's kind of shifted a bit since I've been at Firehose. I think it's been about 5 years I've been an employee. I started as a project manager on that contract. I think that was for about a year, and then I did some project management on another contract, and then after that, it was like 2018, 2019, was doing a lot of like prototyping for new game ideas, like new IP. for the studio, and then I did some like a contract project on my own with MIT, and that was just doing design and programming, basically one man team stuff on that contract project, and then starting this year I've been going back to doing prototyping on new game stuff. So that's what I'm currently working on is doing a lot of prototyping and stuff for another game where we're hoping to start
cool.
ramping up on.
Nice.
Yeah, we've Firehose as a studio has done a bunch of contracts with MIT, and like of varying sizes. I think we just wrapped up another one like last week that I wasn't on, that another developer was on. But yeah, I was working with Philip Tan to basically make a game for one of the studies they were trying to do, like using the game as a platform for a study, which was kind of interesting. But oh, nice.
Any last questions from anyone? If they can think of anything, feel free to type it or chime in.
So is there a last level or no? You can keep going, right?
Yeah, the last level in this one is a Christmas themed level, a bonus level.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I wanted to do more of a like, once you played all the levels, there was like an actual kind of final level, but
Okay.
yeah, it didn't end up making it in. Probably not. I feel like I think I said this. I forget who I was saying.
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
but
you
I
said
feel like I did the like with this game. This is like the best that I feel like I can do right now to like with keeping the game kind of the same. So if I was to do anything else kind of related, it would probably be like a kind of a bit of a different take on it, or yeah, I don't know, or just a different styled game. But I feel like this is kind of, excuse me, this is kind of the like I'm pretty satisfied with this as Catlateral Damage as a, I don't know if I want to say franchise or as an idea, but
yeah. Is there any other style of game that you would love? Like I know like I'm making like a top down shooter, and every now and then I'm like, oh, I just wish I could do like a side scroller, or like is there any kind of side or like a turn based game? Or is there any other kinds of games that you would want to ever go out on your own and do?
I feel like I feel like I've been kind of involved with the business side of devs so much that's kind of like tainted my like ideas for what type of games I want to make, because whenever I have a cool idea, I'm like, no, that's never gonna sell, or I'm not gonna buy that or whatever.
No.
But I always have this like this small nagging voice that's like, you should make a shoot 'em up game, or you should make a bullet hell game.
Nice.
And
those sell, right?
I don't know, they're just like so niche. But well, and then like Vampire Survivors comes out, and then you're like,
right?
oh, that's how you do it, right?
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's one of the, I don't know, small. If I had a bunch of time, I would just sit down and actually make a shoot 'em up game. But I'd have to figure out how to. I think I've done some prototyping on like small bits of it like over the years, but never actually like it's never actually combined into a solid game idea. But I think having done like a whole 3D game, I think it's like it'd be nice to do something 2D for once.